So last night marked the fourth debate in the Democratic presidential primary, but the first to take place against the backdrop of an impeachment inquiry into President Trump. That seemed to be one of the only issues all 12 candidates actually agreed on.
Yeah, they spent the rest of the night sparring over issues like Medicare for all and income inequality. Facing the brunt of those attacks, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who in recent weeks has skyrocketed in the polls. So for more on this, let's bring in Leslie Sanchez. She is a CBS News contributor and a Republican strategist, and our friend Antjuan Seawright. He's a CBSN political contributor and a Democratic strategist and a senior advisor to the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Had a late night last night. I'm surprised that you guys are here bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So Antjuan, perhaps one of the policies that Elizabeth Warren faced the most backlash over when it came to these candidates is her Medicare for All plan. And it was interesting that Senator Amy Klobuchar at one point said to Elizabeth Warren, you know, at least Bernie's being truthful about how he's going to pay for Medicare for All, something that he's always talked about. He has said, he is on the record saying that middle class taxes are going to go up. Warren danced around the issue. She said middle class costs are going to go down. That's not the same as saying that you're not going to be paying more in taxes. Why not just get on the record and move on?
Well, several things. I think you saw for the first time Senator Warren attempt to be defined last night by her policy agenda. Number two, we saw the most dominant issue, I think, in the next election, forget about the primary, on full display once again in a presidential primary discussion. Three, you saw a little heated fellowship between the moderates and the progressives on the stage. And number four, you saw Elizabeth Warren do what most people have criticized her for on a lot of her policy positions. That's due to Tootsie Roll around them. She will not seem to lock down and take the good with the bad when it comes to her policy position. And that's why I think when people say, why does she have trouble with African-American voters? I think it's because she will not pick a lane. Look, my dad used to say all the time, son, pick a lane. When you find yourself in the middle, you get hit by cars coming from the left and the right. And I think that's the trouble she tends to find herself on. Now, with that being said, I still think that considering where we were last night, Ohio, and the message it will take to win a general election, you saw the more pragmatic voices prevail and sound more reasonable on the stage last night.
Yeah. I want to talk to you, Leslie, about the vice president. Joe Biden responded to the criticisms about his son, Hunter. I want to play some of that sound, then we'll talk about, what do you think about how he handled it?
Look, my son did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. I carried out the policy of the United States government in rooting out corruption in Ukraine. And that's what we should be focusing on. And what I wanted to make a point about, and my son's statement speaks for itself. He spoke about it today. My son's statement speaks for itself. What I think is important is we focus on why it's so important to remove this man from office.
So, he addressed it, but then he quickly wanted to pivot. He sort of runs the risk of letting President Trump create and dominate the narrative when he continues to go back to this. But how do you feel about how he handled that?
It was a difficult response, but it was a poor one. It's a poor one because it came too late. He should have anticipated this, come along more forcefully. But this is the issue with it. If you're just a bystander who's kind of checking in and out, you're on a second screen, you're watching the debate, again, it's about Hunter Biden. Again, it's about the Ukraine. If you're just getting snippets of it and you're not really engaged in a 3-hour debate, you have to be pretty much,
there's a pretty important baseball game going on the same night.
There's a big game going on. So all you see is Hunter Biden, Ukraine, and it just looks messy. And for many people, especially coming out of 2016, when you had all of these questions about servers and everything with Hillary Clinton, people just want something new, a fresh start, and that's the challenge. The second challenge Biden has is it's also going to look like a third term for Barack Obama, for better or for worse. And whether you're Republican or Democrat, that's the slot you fall into, and that's extremely difficult to push against. So, and then if you look at the third part of that, if you look at third quarter in terms of cash on hand, there are 4 other candidates on that stage who have more money than Joe Biden. So there's a lot of challenges in that campaign.
Listen, I agree with Leslie on the last point. I said that to his top lieutenants the minute they came out this morning. I said, look, you can't be the front runner and not have infrastructure like the front runner. You just can't do the two. But to one point you made, believe it or not, in all of the mess, I think how you would describe it with his answer, there's still a message. The more the conversation is centered around Joe Biden and Donald Trump, the more that benefits Joe Biden in the Democratic primary, because it feeds into the narrative and it gives life to the narrative that, you know what, this is about electability. And to this point, he has been the only person that Democrats and many Republicans agree that is positioned to take on Trump. I didn't say beat,
it seems
but
like
to take
he's
on.
moving away from that, though. Like what I got from him last night was that the drum that he kept on beating was, I can actually get stuff done. They can make promises, but I can get stuff done because I've got them done in the past. And he seems to be moving away from, and I'm really good friends with this guy named Barry. He doesn't seem to be sort of pushing that any longer.
Right. It's a little bit of the Al Gore, Bill Clinton thing, like how close is too close,
Right.
is good and bad in terms of, and that changes over time. Remember now, Bill Clinton looked a lot better, a much more popular centrist,
Right.
just even despite impeachment.
Right.
So the difference is, if people are voting with their pocketbook right now, they are choosing candidates other than Joe Biden. If people that are looking at getting involved in Iowa, in New Hampshire, all the early areas, they're not looking at Joe Biden. They're looking at alternatives. So that's the rift that you're going to have within the party. We had it on the Republican side. That's legitimate. And the bigger question you talked about in the first part was the taxes issue. Let's think about 1984 and Walter Mondale, about I will raise your taxes. Okay, end of the campaign. Thank you. Goodbye. It's over. Let's think about George H.W. Bush. Read my lips. Anytime you're getting into this area, whether you are promising taxes or not, you're never going to win saying you're going to raise taxes on the middle class. Ever. Full stop. I'll put money on that one because there's just no appetite.
Well, that's why I thought it was interesting. Major Garrett made a point today on CBS this morning that Elizabeth Warren, the fact that she would not go on the record is actually a sound political strategy, because she feels that there is no benefit to explaining that position, because the people that support her already support her regardless of what this Medicare for All is going to cost.
I think what her team realized, debates do not change too many people's minds.
Exactly.
The people who watch debates, they know who they're supporting.
That's
and for the people who are undecided, they will not walk away from last night saying, ooh, that's my candidate. They will not. But to your point, Leslie, about Joe Biden, say what you want, his experience was on display. Picking up on the point you said, the one thing I've noticed about Joe Biden, I've spent some time with him on the campaign trail, where he uses the language of the people. So, of course, he didn't talk about some of the things we normally would hear from him about electability. What he talked about last night was getting things done, because in Ohio and in the Rust Belt, people know him from working across the aisle and being able to deliver. And he knew that what he say will be used against him in the court of public opinion at some point. So, if getting things done is what people want, Democrats and Republicans, and voters that we need to come on this side to win Ohio, he has to communicate with them. Guess what? He talked about getting things done because that's what those voters feel. They felt left out and the policies hadn't benefit. But I guarantee you, when he comes back to South Carolina, he'll be lovey-dovey, cuddling with Barack. He'll start talking about he's the one that can take on Trump. His message changes where he's at.
So I thought that the conversation about domestic policy was good. All the sort of, whether it was taxes or gun control, I thought it was a good conversation. You got a good sense of where everyone stood. When it came to like foreign policy, I sort of felt like the candidates were falling short, especially when they talked about Syria. Then it just pivoted right back to, that president, he doesn't know what he's doing. But I didn't hear a lot about, well, what would you do?
Well, I thought Pete Buttigieg, as somebody who actually served in the region in the theater, had some very strong responses. And he did get into it a little bit with Beto O'Rourke. And I don't know, Leslie, what do you think? I mean, it's interesting. I was watching social media, as I'm sure you were yesterday. And, Mayor Pete got a haircut. And he's a little bit more aggressive, Mayor Pete. In the past, in these past debates, he's been content to sort of carve out his position and not go after anybody. He went after Elizabeth Warren early, and then he had that really powerful moment with Beto O'Rourke, and Congressman O'Rourke hit right back. But I just thought that this is perhaps showing a little bit of fire, and he did explain what he would do if he were president in that situation in Syria, which would be to not betray our allies. Not
betray our allies, but what is the cogent strategy beyond that? So this is the difficult situation. The same criticism you have toward Donald Trump is that it's not well thought out. I would say I have a lot more confidence in the military strategist in the intelligence field that really looks at these issues. They have a plan for next week, our U.S. government. They have a plan for a month from now. But the larger political theater, the larger ramifications, I don't think there's a lot of depth on that stage. There's very few people who really understand it, have been to the region, and I think, if anything, that was what you saw with Barack Obama, why you had Joe Biden put on the ticket, such that the strong prowess on national security and foreign policy. You always need that combination, and it's just not their strong suit right now.
So the question to you, Antjuan, is, does that matter? Are people more concerned about health care and taxes and other stuff?
Let's step back outside the bubble for a second. When you think about foreign policy, for people in Ohio, it really doesn't matter because they don't see a direct correlation. What I think Joe Biden did last night was show his maturity on the stage as it relates to foreign policy. I thought Mayor Pete took his life experiences and made it relevant on the stage, but it was a pivot back to what we've all said, what most of us said before the 2016 election. Donald Trump is not, doesn't have the knowledge to be the commander-in-chief. And I think that was smart because when you look at what people care about, in the end, it's about defeating Donald Trump. So I think that was the one moment that Joe Biden, well, one of the moments Joe Biden was able to display his set of experiences and talk about it from a vice presidential perspective.
I know we got to run, but I just got to ask because Bernie Sanders is a front runner. We haven't talked about him, so I think we should. And I thought it was interesting that you would not be able to tell that Senator Sanders had a heart attack, whatever it was, 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago. He looked, I wrote the damn bill. He used that line. He was raising his hand, trying to get in there, trying to get in the mix. Didn't look like anything had changed.
I think Senator Sanders is someone we're going to look back on history, and he definitely left an imprint and changed the Democratic Party. From what he did last time to charge forward with a movement that people have joined. You have AOC now. You have people who are running, getting elected on his platform, on his ideas, and now they're basically absorbing those ideas on the progressive left.
Right.
Like him, dislike him, don't think he's going to be president, but he has changed the Democratic Party.
He's definitely been a change figure. I think the big thing for him last night was his announcement about his big announcement. Today, they rolled out the endorsement of Representative Omar, which I think will take some gas out of the E. Warren tank. And then Saturday, they will roll out AOC, which I think will bring in also another level of tint to his political windows. So I think that what Bernie's doing, he realized that last night wasn't his jam. The days after was his jam. And I guarantee you the music is going to play loud for him for the next several days because of who his endorsements will be. But I cautioned the campaign. I said this is one of his lieutenants this morning. Endorsements bring out some of your friends, but they bring out all of your enemies. So you just have to be careful.
I like tint the political windows. I'm going to take that one. I will borrow that line.
Yeah, that's a very good line.
It's going to be my bumper sticker.
Leslie, Antjuan, so great.
Thank you so
guys.
much.
Couldn't do this without you. Thank you very much.